Good morning and thanks for being with us. Tensions over Taiwan have escalated overnight. China has launched military drills which Taiwan says are an invasion of its territory, and that live fire exercises in the sea and airspace around the island are breaking United Nations rules. It's seen as a direct response to a visit to the island by a senior US politician, Nancy Pelosi, a provocation that's led to China, which considers Taiwan to be part of its territory, to warn that those playing with fire will get burned. Joe Pike reports.
In China, there may have been anger, but in Taiwan, there was applause.
We come in friendship to Taiwan. We come in peace for the region.
Nancy Pelosi spoke of peace, but she knows this visit is provocative.
Today, the world faces a choice between democracy and autocracy. America's determination to preserve democracy here in Taiwan and around the world remains ironclad.
In response, China has launched targeted military action, including firing long-range ammunition and testing guided weapons. It is a display of military might as well as one of anger, aimed at the US.
Raise the tensions in the Taiwan Strait and embolden the arrogance of the Taiwan independence forces. This is a highly dangerous trick, such as playing with fire, and those playing with fire will get burnt.
The self-governing island is surrounded by South Korea and Japan to the north, and the Philippines to the south. But China is its closest neighbour, just 112 miles away, and Beijing sees it as a breakaway province. Later this week, in 6 areas surrounding Taiwan, the Chinese military is expected to carry out further exercises, including live fire drills.
By the time this became a topic as to whether she should go or not, it was already too late, knowing the speaker, to persuade her otherwise. And it probably wasn't in our interest at that point to let China talk us out of it, even if maybe it would have been better that she not go at all in the first place.
This trip is largely popular with members of Congress, but in the 3D chess of international diplomacy, the privately voiced reticence in the White House and Pentagon may be linked to concerns about a different part of the world, Ukraine. So far, the Chinese have not provided any significant military support to Vladimir Putin, such as their world-class drones. But some here worry this visit may mean that could change. The Taiwanese government will be delighted these pictures are being beamed around the world, even with the greater risk of escalation and confrontation. Joe Pike, Sky News, Washington.
Well, our Security and Defence editor Deborah Haynes is with us here now. Deborah, good morning to you. So as Joe was saying there is a threat of escalation here. Just how likely is that China, the rhetoric has been really strong?
China's clearly furious at this visit. The fact that you had the Chinese ambassador to the UK yesterday convening this press conference, it's very rare that he does that, unlike his predecessor. And the language that he used was of outrage, warning about that threat of he called the UK, he said that the US was playing a highly dangerous trick, and then if you play with fire, you'll get burnt. But clearly neither side is going to want this to escalate into a full-on confrontation. Confrontation between the US and China, both nuclear powers, could lead to a new world war, let's face it. However, the risk right now, given China's angry response to this visit with these very large-scale live firing drills from the air and from the sea, is that there is a mistake, an accident, and there is an accidental escalation into direct confrontation between China and Taiwanese forces. And then the question is, how does the US respond? Clearly, we're not in that space at the moment, but it's a very dangerous time, and the tripwire is there for further confrontation.
Certainly is. Okay, Deborah, for now, thank you so much. Thanks for coming in. All right, well, joining us now from Taipei is a journalist at Taiwan Plus, James Chater. James, good to have you with us today. Thanks for being with us. So, look, what's the reaction been so far on the island and in Taipei to Pelosi's visit, and what do we expect her to be doing today?
Well, Pelosi earlier on today has met with Taiwanese legislators in Taiwan's parliament. She then met with Taiwan's president and then is expected to do some more meetings later on this afternoon before flying off at 5 p.m. You know, the reception has largely been warm. I think the level of nervousness has definitely ticked up in the earlier hours of today as we've started to learn more about these live fire drills which are taking place around the whole of the main Taiwanese mainland. We've seen in some of the reports coming out now that these live fire drills are taking place as close as 12 nautical miles to the Taiwanese mainland. And it's important to point out because, you know, the Chinese military does engage with these sorts of intimidatory tactics. Usually, you know, it's a regular occurrence for the Chinese Air Force to send aircraft into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. But to see live fire drills taking place around the entirety of the Taiwanese mainland really is, you know, a marked kind of escalation in terms of what we've seen previously.
OK, James Chater there in Taipei for us. Thank you so much for that. Of course, more on that story throughout the morning here on Sky News. Now, the life support of 12-year-old Archie Battersbee is due to be withdrawn this morning at 11 a.m. after his family lost a Supreme Court bid to keep it going. However, his parents say they'll be asking the European Court of Human Rights to intervene in a last ditch to delay turning off their son's life support. Sadia Chowdhury reports.
Archie Battersbee's heart is still beating, but that could all change in the next few hours.
Basically, I've gone into the other room because I've blown my top a bit and gone to see Archie. And while I'm stroking Archie's head, I get an email from our legal team saying that the trust have
Been very brutal.
Have been very brutal and are refusing to let Archie go to a hospice.
It's a decision that came after months of legal proceedings at both the High Court and the Court of Appeal, before the family ultimately took their case to the United Nations under its Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
I did say I would fight till the bitter end with Archie, and as his mum, that's exactly what I've done. And I hope I've paved the way for any other parents that want to go up against a trust in this country and the justice system. It needs reforming, dramatically needs reforming. It's not right, it's not fair, it's not right.
The UN response was swift, an injunction on Britain to continue Archie's treatment, but the British government wasn't going to listen. In a most unusual step, the Health Secretary intervened to tell judges here at the country's highest appeals court that the UN Convention isn't binding because it hasn't been incorporated into UK law. The Supreme Court, which had been asked by the family to give Archie more time, refused the appeal, leaving some human rights lawyers puzzled.
On the face of it, the UK government could say, well, if you're not going to grant a stay for the UN Committee on the Rights of the Disabled, why should you grant a stay on the basis of a treaty that's also not incorporated in UK law? Therefore, we're going to start sending people off to Rwanda.
The trust treating Archie says it will move ahead with the court-ordered withdrawal of treatment. But for his mother, Holly Dance, the fight continues. She says she'll take the case to the European Court of Human Rights with just hours to go before her child's life support is removed. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in London.
Well, our reporter Matthew Thompson is covering this for us this morning and joins us now live from the Royal London Hospital. Matthew, good morning to you. So just a heartbreaking story. Where does this go from here? What can the family expect to happen in the next few hours, do we think?
Well, look, we really are entering the final stages of this long legal fight for Archie's family. At 11 o'clock today, his life support is due to be switched off, but that's pending this application to the European Court of Human Rights. The family have until 9 o'clock this morning to make that application, and they have indicated that they're going to do so. His family would like him to die what they've been calling a natural death. They'd like to move him to a hospice to receive care in his final days. And this is really, as I say, the final legal hurdle that they can attempt to jump over, if you like. The ECHR really is, after you've just been hearing a succession of challenges in the High Court here, in the Supreme Court, in the Court of Appeal. But I'm afraid legal experts believe that it has slim chances of success. You might remember in the similarly tragic circumstances in 2017, the case of Charlie Gard, the ECHR simply refused to intervene. So whilst we shouldn't prejudge this case, I'm afraid the weight of legal precedent isn't in Archie's family's favour. OK, Matthew, for now, appreciate that. We'll speak to you again later. Thank you. Now, let's take a look at the morning's newspapers, and we'll start off with the front page of the Metro, which picks up on that story about Archie. Heartbreak for Archie's family is how the Metro put it. They say a judge decided that the 12-year-old's life support can be switched off. The Times leads with a poll showing 2/3 of Tory party members prefer Liz Truss as the next Prime Minister and next leader of the party, of course. The Telegraph reports that voting has been delayed because of a cyber threat to the election process. While the Daily Express has an interview with Liz Truss and says that she's the only candidate who can deliver the growth that Britain needs. Well, let's get more now on how it's looking in the race to replace Boris Johnson. Our politics correspondent Amanda Acas is with us now. Amanda, good morning.
Morning.
So let's pick up on what we saw there on the front page of the newspaper. First of all, on that security fear about these ballots being sent out, they were meant to go out beginning of the week, but they have been delayed.
Yes, as if the Conservative Party leadership race hadn't been dramatic enough. Now we're told that threats from cyber hackers mean the start of the voting has been delayed, and there's also been a change to the way it's being run as well. So plans for members to be able to change their votes online, something that Rishi Sunak's team have been hoping would give him a bit of a chance to make up some of that ground he's lost to Liz Truss potentially, have been dropped. The party say they've been speaking to the National Cyber Security Centre, that's part of GCHQ, about this, and have therefore decided to beef up security, and they've written to members to explain all of this, saying they will get their ballots sent out this week. Now, we don't know about any specific threats, but of course we know that China, Russia, Iran have all been accused of interfering in overseas elections recently. As for the candidates, well, they're due in Cardiff later on today for another hustings event with Tory party members. It's been a bruising 24 hours or so for Liz Truss after her U-turn over the flagship part of her War on Whitehall waste policy we were talking about yesterday, forced to drop her plans for regional job boards, which he said would save £8.8 billion by meaning lower pay for public sector workers in future outside London and the South East. There was a huge backlash against that yesterday morning from Tory MPs concerned about the impact on their levelling up agenda over this, and so she's had to back down on that. But good news for her from the polls, showing that 60% of members now saying they're going to vote for her compared to 26% for Rishi Sunak, so really widening the gap there. And worse for him, 9 in 10 party members say they've already made up their minds. We'll have more on the polling in about 10 minutes with our polling pit stop.
Certainly will. You took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you so much for that. And a reminder, if you needed it, that tomorrow Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will both take part in a live special programme. It's called The Battle for Number 10. It will be here on Sky News, and it will be hosted by Kay Burley. It starts at 8. Now, the United States has warned its citizens that there may be revenge attacks targeting them following the drone strike that killed al-Qaeda's leader Ayman al-Zawahiri over the weekend. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has been speaking to the fire chief Joseph Pfeiffer, who lost a brother in the 9/11 attacks and was close to the North Tower of the World Trade Center when the first plane hit.
It was a beautiful summer day like today, bright sunshine. And I was standing in the street and I saw the first plane aim and crash into the World Trade Center.
On September the 11th, 2001, Joseph Pfeiffer was the first New York fire chief to reach the Twin Towers.
Within 102 minutes, both World Trade Center towers collapsed to the ground, went completely dark, that we couldn't see the hand in front of our face. And we wondered if we were still alive.
343 of his men died in the towers that day, his brother Kevin among them. Does Zawahiri's death now make a difference for you all these years on?
Hearing the news that one of the masterminds of 9/11 was taken out allowed me a sense of closure. It allowed us victims of terrorism to have a voice, that we're heard, that terrorists won't be tolerated, and that their acts are acts against humanity.
Ayman al-Zawahiri was quite literally Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, the brains of al-Qaeda, behind the face we all know. More than anywhere else, this is the place which bears the scars of his work. New York, Manhattan, Ground Zero, a calm now in the heart of a city ripped apart. Zawahiri's protection by the Taliban, his presence in Kabul, all that fundamentally undermines the Taliban claim that it is a reformed organisation. Where he was protected, more will be too. Afghanistan is an enduring challenge. But for the victims, 21 years of pain has eased just a little. Mark Stone, Sky News in New York.
Okay, let's take a look now at some of today's other news headlines. And a 20-year-old man has been charged under the Treason Act after an incident in the grounds of Windsor Castle last Christmas. The Crown Prosecution Service said that Jaswant Singh Chahal, who's from Southampton, had been charged with being near to the person of the Queen, willfully producing a loaded crossbow with intent to use to injure the person of Her Majesty. A new report from the RAC says that major retailers are failing to reduce petrol prices in line with falling wholesale costs. The automotive services company says that the wholesale cost of unleaded is now back to early May prices, but drivers are paying more than 50 pence extra per litre. And voters in Kansas in the US have turned out in record numbers to reject efforts to tighten the state's abortion laws. It comes after the US Justice Department filed a lawsuit that challenges restrictive abortion legislation in Idaho. It's the first major action by the Justice Department challenging a state since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June. Now, a snorkeler has suffered a suspected shark attack off the coast of Cornwall. Yes, the swimmer was reportedly bitten on the leg by one of those things. That's a blue shark. This happened near Penzance on Thursday. Now, they were on a snorkeling tour. The company behind it says that the incident is extremely rare, and they're talking to shark experts about what happened. The Coast Guard has said the snorkeler was put in the care of the ambulance service to treat the leg injury. The swimmer was able to walk away afterwards despite suffering that injury, and can confirm that the beaches have not been closed. Now, Labour has criticised Liz Truss after her campaign argued it could save billions if it paid public sector workers in cheaper regions of the country less than their counterparts in the capital and the south of England. The Tory leadership frontrunner has now abandoned the policy, insisting it had been misrepresented. Well, let's bring in Shabana Mahmood. She's the Labour MP for Ladywood in Birmingham and is the party's national campaign coordinator. Shabana Mahmood, thank you so much for being with us, and good morning to you.
Morning.
I wonder if we can just pick up, if we may, because I think I know what you're going to say about that Liz Truss policy, which she's rode back on. But I wonder if we can pick up on how well the Labour Party are doing right now against the Conservative parties. There is a lead in the polls, the latest polls that have come in, but only a 1% lead. Why is it still so tight?
Oh, well, look, I mean, the polls of the last few months have been showing the Labour Party in the lead by differing and varying amounts. But as a Labour Party's national campaign coordinator, I'm not following the movements of individual polls here and there. The main thing that matters is that we are taking our case to the country, that Keir Starmer has, achieved in 2 years what Neil Kinnock, for example, took about 8 years to achieve in terms of turning the party around, making us electorally competitive again. When we went down to that defeat in 2019, our worst for nearly a century, people were writing us off for a decade or more. Not only has Keir, under his leadership, brought us back into contention, got us back on the pitch, but we are out there. We are making progress, as we did in the local elections, which took place all over the UK just in May this year. We're winning key by-elections as well. So we are making very solid progress under Keir's leadership, working from that very low point of our 2019 general election defeat. So those are the real indicators for the progress that the Labour Party is making. You'll forgive me if I'm not going to, comment on every single poll. There's many polls. They have different methodologies. They're showing slightly different things. Mostly they're showing that the Labour Party is in the lead ahead of the Conservative Party. But for me, what matters is, are we making progress in all of the areas that we need to be winning in if we are going to win and get a majority Labour government at the next general election? And the answer, based on the local election results and the by-election results that we've been getting, is yes.
Yeah, and Siobhan, I wouldn't expect you to comment on all the polls, but I would expect you to have a thought about why it is seemingly so tight still, considering the disarray that the Conservative Party have been. I mean, they just ejected the Prime Minister, and now they're battling it out to replace him, and the Labour Party is only a smidgen ahead.
Well, no. Well, partly what you're going to see reflected in some of the polls that are taking place at the moment is a recalibration in the sort of post Boris Johnson era for the Conservative Party. But as I said, for me, as I plan ahead to the next general election for the Labour Party, with a clear strategy to get us to a majority Labour government at that next general election, which will be a stunning achievement based on our 2019 general election result. What I'm focusing on is not individual polls, which will fluctuate, and the polls have been extremely volatile for some time now. There are a lot of voters out there who are up for grabs, as it were, who haven't made up their mind, who are willing to change their mind, and it's our job to take the case to them for the Labour Party and persuade them to trust us with their vote at the next general election, whenever it comes. And as I say, we have made progress. If you look at our results in the local elections, where we won in the popular vote across the seats that we would need to win in order to form a majority Labour government, we were winning the popular vote in many of those seats, which means that we would be winning them at a general election if that was taking place now. And we made progress in the Wakefield by-election, a seat that we took off the Tories only a few weeks ago, which had added, as it were, to Boris Johnson's woes and was a key driver in removing the Prime Minister from his position. So the Labour Party is making electoral progress in the ways that it matters, which is actual results that are being delivered on the ground.
I appreciate that, Siobhan, and no one's disputing the progress that's been made. It was a really low ebb when the party was led by Jeremy Corbyn, so to move on from that is something that definitely should have happened. But I wonder if this is an issue of leadership at the moment. There is still a problem, isn't there, with whether Labour Party members, people in the shadow cabinet, can go onto picket lines. Can you just clear up what the decision has been made by Sir Keir Starmer as to whether people should be on the picket lines? Because we saw Lisa Nandy there a couple of days ago. She was reprimanded but not sacked. Sam Tarry was sacked a few days hence before for being on a picket line.
Well, look, there's a clear difference between both of those instances, and so let me just explain. Keir has made very clear that we are a government in waiting. We want the people of our country to put us into government at that next election, and we want that election as soon as possible, and think it should happen as soon as the new Tory Prime Minister is elected. A government in waiting has to behave seriously like a government and be model the behaviour that we would have in government. If you're a government minister, you need to be able to get round a negotiating table with public sector unions, pay officials, worker bodies, representatives, and get to fair negotiations and act in good faith. You can't do that if you walk off, if you get to that negotiating table from picketing at a picket line. So he's been very clear that, Labour frontbenchers should not be picketing at a picket line, but there is a world of difference between that and, members of parliament meeting workers in their constituency, talking to them about the issues that are affecting them, their pay, their conditions, how they're struggling with a cost of living crisis. That is behaviour you'd expect, not just from Labour MPs, by the way, but you'd expect it from all members of parliament to engage with their constituents and talk to them about the issues that are affecting them. That's what Lisa was doing. The reason that Sam Tarry was removed from his post was because he broke collective responsibility when it came to doing a media round from a picket line and making up a Labour Party policy on the hoof. That is not acceptable for Labour frontbenchers. You would expect us all to maintain discipline and collective responsibility. When that is broken, there will be consequences. But there is a world of difference between that case and all members of parliament wanting to engage with their constituents, as is completely right and proper. I would expect Tory MPs to be engaging with workers in their constituency. If they profess to care about how the cost of living crisis is affecting everybody, they should be talking to workers as well.
Shabana Mahmood, you've made your point very forcefully. Thank you very much. Shabana Mahmood, National Campaign Coordinator for the Labour Party. Thank you for your time. All right, let's dig into some of the polling. We'll not talk about Labour just yet. We'll talk about the Tories. We're joined by the Research Director from UCOV, Patrick English, to dig into some of the latest polling we've done. Patrick, good morning to you. Thanks for being with us. Now, the first poll here is going to make delightful reading for the Truss camp. I think we can bring it up. Huge lead has been drawn out by Liz Truss.
Yes, that's right. So what we found in our latest polling of Conservative Party members is that Rishi Sunak has made no progress climbing the mountain that we found him at the bottom of at the start of this campaign. In fact, arguably, he's fallen back a bit further into the valley. Liz Truss has extended her lead over Rishi Sunak in those head-to-heads. So that's among people, Conservative Party members who gave us an intention, who said that they had an idea about who they would vote for, and that's 69% for Truss and 31% for Sunak. An interesting thing that we've noticed and continually noticed throughout this campaign is that though Liz Truss is winning against younger voters, older voters, those who voted Leave, Rishi Sunak is ahead among Conservative Party members who voted to remain. So that's kind of the one area where he is.
Which is strange, isn't it?
Absolutely. Since Liz Truss was quite a prominent Remain campaigner in the 2016 referendum, Rishi Sunak, of course, backed Brexit and has been quite vocal about how he backed Brexit in 2016. To see him ahead with Remainers and Truss ahead with Leavers is quite interesting.
What does that tell us about sort of the sentiments of those voters? Does it say that the centrist part of the party is more backing of Rishi Sunak, do we think?
Probably that's the case, yes. I think as well for Liz Truss has been the born-again Brexiteer element is very strong. Liz Truss became the face, arguably, of that kind of post-Brexit global Britain when she was in the papers, she was on the news, signing trade deals, and she had quite a big sort of social media campaign around that. So I think that's reflected in the results that we're seeing now.
OK, let's talk to us about some of the polling around whether it was right for Boris Johnson to resign. This is quite interesting as well. It tells you a little bit about the thinking that's going on in some Conservative Party members' heads. Let's bring that up if we can. The question was put, was it right for MPs to oust the PM? You can see the numbers there. 53% say it was the wrong decision.
Yes, exactly. So a majority, just about over a majority of Conservative Party members think that it was the wrong decision for MPs to effectively remove Boris Johnson. However, 41% say it was right. So I think we can characterise the party as very much split on this issue. And I think probably what this does is it plays a little bit into the figures we see before. Liz Truss, of course, did not resign. Rishi Sunak did and was sort of seen as a catalyst of the eventual resignation of Boris Johnson. So perhaps this figure is playing a little bit into the vote intention as well.
And following on from that, you've also asked the question of who they prefer as PM, and if all three of them are up, Truss, Sunak and Johnson, we can see that they would still prefer Boris Johnson to be the Prime Minister.
Absolutely, and this highlights the whole, I think, the Conservative Party are in right now, and the frustration perhaps among the Conservative Party members. When we were polling at the beginning of this race, very few of them were saying that they'd like Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to be in that final two. It was all about Ben Wallace, it was all about Penny Mordaunt. Kemi Badenoch was polling very, very well. So I think perhaps that's what we're seeing here, is that the Conservative Party membership aren't that enamoured with the choice in front of them, and would probably rather Boris Johnson stay than those two. But of course, that's not the choice in front of them.
No, it's certainly not at this point. And I said we'd come to it. Let's look at the national voting intention now, and as we can see, I said to Shabana Mahmood that Labour Party were only just ahead, and you can see it's just 1 percentage point there. I mean, how do you guys view this polling right now? Should Labour be doing way better, considering what's been happening to the Conservative Party?
Yes, I think probably first off it's important to note that this is, of course, just one poll, and we want to see a couple of further polls from us that have a narrowing lead to be sure that there has been some movement in that direction. But I think there are two reasons to expect perhaps that the gap would narrow. The first is, of course, the Conservatives have got rid of a deeply unpopular Prime Minister, a Prime Minister the public didn't think should be in the job, who they didn't trust, and now with him gone, perhaps the result of seeing a bit of a Conservative Party rebound. Secondly, of course, the news cycle has been consistently about the Conservative Party now for the best part of a month. So with them considered all the time sort of in the polls and Conservative Party policy being discussed over and over, I think perhaps that's playing into it a little bit as well. So, of course, it's one poll and we're going to have to wait to see. But there's reason to suspect that the gap should narrow.
It certainly should. And how many people are being asked this question, Patrick? What's the
just over 1,500.
OK. Pretty good poll, then.
Yeah, pretty good poll.
All right. Patrick English from YouGov. Really appreciate your time this morning. Excellent analysis. Thank you. All right. Now, let me just remind you again that tomorrow, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are going to both take part in a live special programme here on Sky News. It's called The Battle for Number 10. It's going to be hosted by Kay Burley and it will begin at 8 p.m. Do not miss it. All right, let's take a look at what the weather has in store for the next couple of days.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, the weather will settle down towards the weekend as high pressure builds, but it will be wet at times today for some. Thicker cloud, patchy rain and hill fog will affect southern parts of England this morning. Meanwhile, a band of showery rain will push southwards across Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Republic. Blustery showers will continue in the north and the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And with parts of the world experiencing extreme weather conditions, remember what it was like here a couple of weeks ago. Let's take a look at the impact that climate change is having on the planet right now. This is our climate change dashboard revealing exactly how the world has changed global warming since 1880. You can see there the real-time power mix using a lot of gas, no coal, 45% renewables. On the top left, we show you how much warmer the Earth is now from 1880, and that's when modern record-keeping began. And finally, bottom left, the total amount of CO2 emissions in millions of tonnes. But that figure there, 45% renewables, is good, considering the situation the planet finds itself in. Now, Princess Charlotte's joined the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, your mum and dad to her, at the Commonwealth Games yesterday. And here are some pictures of her. Lovely stuff. The 7-year-old was at the Games and the papers have picked out a bunch of pictures of her pulling funny faces. There are some nice pictures of her just looking completely normal like a 7-year-old, but she seemed to be having a lovely time there, giving Dad a thumbs up. I wonder if it was because he said she could have chips for lunch. Now, does it remind you of anyone else? Of course it does. Earlier this summer, Prince Louis made front page headlines after being snapped pulling faces at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Not happy about the noise that he heard on the balcony as the flypast was going on, but they're taking a nice cuddle from Grandpa. Good to see these pictures. I mean, that's at Wimbledon by the looks of things, I think. But nice to see the Prince and Princess having a nice time, and why wouldn't they be? Hello there and welcome back. Now, the latest polling in the Tory leadership contest puts Liz Truss well ahead of Rishi Sunak in support from the party members, who, of course, will decide who wins. Let's get the thoughts of two young members of the Conservative Party. I'm pleased to say we're joined now by 21-year-old Tory councillor Hanan Sarwar, who is undecided but said to be leaning towards Liz Truss. And we've got Ben Souter, who is 16 and a member of the Romford Young Conservatives and is backing Rishi Sunak. Hanan and Ben, good morning to you both. Thanks for being with us. Hanan, first of all to you, I said you were leaning towards Liz Truss. Is that right? Are you thinking Truss is the better candidate?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, for me, whoever becomes the next Prime Minister, they have one goal and one aim, and that is uniting the Conservative Party and making sure we're in a position to fight the next general election and able to retain our red wall seats that turned blue in 2019 under Boris Johnson. And for me, from what I'm seeing in the polls, from what I'm hearing from members when I'm speaking to them, and what I'm actually watching on social media, on the debates and on the hustings, Liz Truss is coming across as a much stronger candidate. And I think currently, as it stands, she is probably best suited to take over Boris Johnson and be the continuity candidate and deliver on all manifesto pledges. Saying that, the contest is still very early. I do like Rishi Sunak, and there's a lot to play for in the coming days and weeks before we get our ballot papers and I vote.
And Ben, do you agree with that analysis of holding on to the red wall and that Liz Truss would be the better placed person to hold on to that red wall?
I think that should be the one aim of the Tory party, and it's to hold on to the red wall that we won in 2019 with Boris Johnson. I do not think Liz Truss is the right person to lead us through the next general election, and that's because Rishi has a real plan. Rishi's had a plan for so long. I've been supporting him even before Boris resigned. I always said to my fellow Young Conservative members, Rishi's going to be the next Prime Minister. That's because he's always had a plan and he's always delivered for the people.
But Ben, you'll know that some of the Conservative Party members think of him as a bit of a Brutus character, stabbing Boris Johnson in the back. How do you answer that criticism?
I don't agree. There was 60 government resignations in that day, in the 2 days before Boris resigned. And there was letters of no confidence, and we saw the no confidence vote, where Boris only just got in. And I think that Rishi this isn't orchestrated. People were upset in the party because of Boris Johnson's behaviour. I, myself, didn't like the way it was orchestrated. I think the members should have had a say in what happened. But that's the rules of the party, and that's what we live with. So, but I do think that this isn't Rishi's fault. This isn't an orchestrated attack.
Hanan, what do you think about that? Is it Rishi's fault? I mean, there are lots of accusations flying around that he was the one that stabbed Boris Johnson in the back.
I am no fan of Boris Johnson. I think towards the end of his tenureship, he did become a liability for the Conservative Party. But one of the main reasons we removed him was that he received a fine during Partygate. And Rishi Sunak also was fined in Partygate. So he isn't going to give us a clean start or a fresh break from everything that's happened in Downing Street and Westminster. And my biggest worry with Rishi is if we do elect him as our leader, he will have my full support, but he is still tainted with the Partygate scandal, and the Labour Party can use that against us. And Rishi, over the course of the campaign, has made various U-turns on tax cuts, on China, on EU regulation. And for me, the biggest problem is he was our Chancellor. Yes, he delivered furlough. Yes, he did the bounce back scheme, but he did increase taxes. And it's not, you can't be a Conservative and increase taxes. It's just, in my opinion, not viable. So for me, Liz Truss is offering a really clear sort of plan for when she is elected as Prime Minister. She will take bold steps to allow our economic growth to develop. She will go to the EU and slash red tape to help farmers and to help our economy. And on top of that, she's actually willing to take immediate support on the cost of living. At the start of the campaign, I really liked Penny Mordaunt, and I hoped she would be on the final two, but that's not the case. In the last 24 hours or so, we've seen Ben Wallace, Penny Mordaunt, Tom Tugendhat, figures across the Conservative Party from a wide range of backgrounds endorsing Liz. And for me, that is like a taster of her future cabinet, which looks extremely strong. And with Rishi, I haven't seen that yet.
And Hanan, in the beginning of your answer there, you mentioned flip-flopping and U-turns. I mean, Liz Truss did a massive one yesterday, didn't she? She had this policy about cutting civil servants' pay, which would affect people living in poorer parts of the country, perhaps in the red wall, and then she had to row back on it immediately when she found out how unpopular it was. What does that say about her judgment?
This is why I'm entirely undecided. Rishi's had about 8 big U-turns in this contest so far. Liz had a U-turn yesterday on regional pay boards. So this is the problem we have. We need to hear from these candidates and now get onto the real substance and policy as to what they're promising. It's all well and good saying we want economic growth, but we now need to see plans as to how this will be delivered. It's why I'm still undecided and leaning more towards Liz Truss, because it seems like she has a better group of MPs supporting her, a strong support from the membership, and whoever becomes Prime Minister needs to unite the Conservative Party, because it's these Conservative members, these Conservative activists, these councillors that are going to go out, knock on the doorsteps and persuade people to vote for the Conservative Party. So it's now time to get some real substance from both Rishi and Liz as to what they're going to do to level up. Liz has already spoken about broadband infrastructure. She's spoken about slashing the red tape, fixing the protocol, tackling on Russia. So I need to hear more from Rishi as to what he will do to beat Liz and what is his different perspective that makes him better suited to become Prime Minister.
I mean, we're going to hear, I'm sure, plenty of that in the Sky News debate tomorrow night at 8. But Ben, go on, you heard that there. Hanan says that he's still a little undecided. He's leaning towards Liz, but persuade him that your man Rishi is the one that he should vote for.
I'd just like to quickly go back to what Hanan said about the pandemic and how Rishi was the Chancellor at the time. There was an economic global crisis and a pandemic that we'd never, ever expect. That is an unprecedented situation for a Chancellor to be in. And Rishi handled it amazingly, saving 11.6 million jobs through the furlough scheme, helping millions through his SEISS schemes to help the self-employed. And I think Rishi has a proven track record to make sure that he can deliver for this country once he's elected in September. He has a plan, and he always has done. And he has the experience. He has experience for the last 2 years dealing with the pandemic, and he knows the way to fight back from that.
OK, we've run out of time, guys, but I thought that was great. Thank you both very much, Ben Souter from Romford and Hanan Sawa from Wilmslow Town Council. Thanks both. Now moving on, and intimidation and sexualisation is still a huge problem for female and non-binary DJs. That's according to a new report. Now, we've spoken to one DJ who told us of her experience of being assaulted while she was at work and how it led her to stop wearing skirts and dresses. Bethany Manel reports on the study, which also looked at how well women are represented in the industry.
How are we feeling out there?
Playing to a record-breaking crowd at the UEFA Women's Euro 2022 opening match,
But a new report has found that the music industry is far from a level playing field for female or non-binary DJs. Spearheaded by DJ Jaguar, the study into gender representation in UK dance music found that just 5% of music in the charts is from women and non-binary artists alone. 58% of tracks feature male artists only, leaving 37% of dance tracks featuring artist collaborations between genders. But steps are being taken to encourage women and non-binary artists to step behind the decks.
Being the only girl in the room, you do just feel like unwelcome, and you feel like you can't really reach your true potential. And I think having people around you that you can relate to, that look like you, makes you feel like, oh, maybe I can try that out.
And while DJing can seem like the dream job, the study also highlighted the intimidation and the sexualisation experienced by many female and non-binary artists while in the workplace.
This is quite difficult to say, but I've been sexually assaulted at work, and I did report it. Nothing happened. I stopped wearing skirts, and I've stopped wearing dresses, just because I know that when I'm bending down on the decks, I'd have people taking pictures of my skirt.
And lessons learned from the deep dive into dance music are applicable to the wider music industry too.
Just revealing some of these new statistics that we've come up with, and all these amazing quotes from artists and people in the industry that have been so wonderful, and coming forward with all their perspectives, all of that hopefully just increases that momentum.
In an industry long dominated by men, change could take time, but it'll be music lovers who'll be the real winners if the field is opened up for all. Bethany Manel, Sky News.
Hello and welcome back. Now, a new survey suggests as many as 1 in 3 school children are going to school without having eaten. One charity, Magic Breakfast, aims to help fix that and break down the barrier that hunger can create to education by setting up breakfast clubs. I'm pleased to say that we're joined by a head teacher who's seen the effect that hunger can have on learning. That's Helen Ryan from Dunscombe Primary School, and the Director of Fundraising and Development at Magic Breakfast, Emily Wilkie. Good morning to you both, Emily and Helen. First of all, to you, Emily, just tell us what kind of programmes are you guys putting in place to try and make sure that kids get fed first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, as you said, the situation at the moment is a crisis. We have as many as 2.6 million children at risk of starting their school day having had nothing to eat. And this has a huge impact on their ability to learn. We know that in Magic Breakfast, a hungry child is unable to concentrate, affects their behaviour. So what we do is we offer a healthy breakfast and expert support so that those children can have a breakfast without stigma at the start of the day, so that we can unlock their education and learning.
And Helen, to you, tell us about some of the kids that you're seeing who are coming in who haven't been able to have breakfast before starting school. What does that do to the way that they start the school day?
Well, I think first of all, like Emily says, there's a sort of a big link to attainment and how they're going into lessons. I think it's more than that. A child that hasn't had breakfast, that's coming in hungry, their behaviour will start to be affected. They'll be emotionally dysregulated. And they won't be ready to learn. They won't feel settled. So that's why our kind of breakfast clubs are so important at Dunscombe.
And tell us about how those breakfast clubs work then. What kind of things are the kids being given? What kind of breakfast are they getting? Is it porridge? Is it cereal? Like, what do they get?
They get great breakfast, actually. They can get porridge, cereal, scrambled eggs, pancakes. It's a really calm atmosphere. It's open from 7 o'clock in the morning. There's board games to play, craft, reading, and we also run sports sessions twice a week just to get everyone's heart moving a bit. And they're really, really popular. So we call it a soft start. You can come from 7 in the morning until 8:30. And we find that children are really settled and then ready to start the day.
OK, Helen, Ryan and Emily, you have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for being with us and keep up that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at some images from the newspapers this morning that we really like the looks of. This is from The Telegraph. Impressive. That is a cartwheel galaxy made up of bright made of a bright inner ring. The image was released by NASA yesterday. It shows a cluster of galaxies thought to have been formed after a high-speed collision 400 million years ago. Not bad at all. And here's one from The Times. That is acrobatic. It shows a Ukrainian circus joining forces with a group of Czech performers to bring a new show called Boom to the Edinburgh Fringe this year. That's a hell of a leap there. The lady in the back. And the Daily Mirror. Shell-shocked in the Mirror shows an escaped giant tortoise decided to crawl along some train tracks on Monday morning, bringing train services to a halt. That brings a new meaning to a slow-moving train, I guess.